Okay, so we're making a video on how we're looking at making black walnut syrup. Now we've got these taps that we bought off Amazon. We'll put a link to it in the description. But these, you just drill a hole in the tree, tap these in, and then you put a container on it to catch the sap, and we'll show you how to do that in just a minute. But right now I'm going to put the tap in. So pick a place on the tree. Looks about right. Tap the tap into the tree, and then we're going to put the container on it to catch the sap. Right now it's early March and it doesn't look like the sap. We had a little bit running a while ago, but it doesn't look like there's a lot of sap running just yet. So we're going to go ahead and get this thing set up here. Alright, so today I'm out here gathering sap. We don't seem to be getting as much sap as other people that I've seen. This is our first time doing this, so not sure what's going on, but we're not getting a lot of sap, but we are getting some. I don't know if we've waited too long this year, but we're going to collect what we get and try to make some syrup out of that. Okay, so we've been collecting sap for a couple of days and it's not really running like I thought it would. So there's a couple of possibilities that it could be. One, we may have waited too long. This is, we're about a week or so into March and we're on the Arkansas-Missouri border in the northern part of Arkansas. So that's one thing, because we've had some warm weather earlier. We should have done this earlier in the spring. Another possibility is when I put these taps in before, when you drill the hole, it should be at a slight upward angle, and I don't think maybe I did that, so I'm going to drill these at a slight upward angle. We're going to do a couple more trees and we'll see if we get some better results collecting this sap from these black walnut trees. All right, another thing I found online was that you want to find a place where there's a large root on the same side of the tree as there's a large limb. And we've got a large limb up here above us, and there's a large root right here. So I'm going to put this one on this side of the tree. From what I read, you can put up to 2 taps in a tree. So we're going to try this, and I'm going to be sure and drill this at a slight upward angle. And we're going to compare these two, and that gives us something to work with while we're doing this experiment, because this is the first time we've actually done this. So I'm going to drill this, put this tap in, and then we'll see if we get a better flow from this one than we do from the other one. Alright, so I've made sure that our hole is tapped out good and got all the wood chips out of it and everything so it doesn't stop it up. And alright, this one's at a slight upward angle. I don't see anything coming out, but we'll put the bucket on it and we'll see how it works out. Now what we've done is, instead of buying buckets for, since this is an experiment, we went ahead this first year and we're using some, clean water jugs. So I'm going to mount this one on there and then we can compare the two. This is about the same type of jug, about the same size. That one's got a little bit in it from when I cleaned it or emptied it out early this morning. So we'll put this one up here and we'll compare the two. Tomorrow we'll come out and we'll look at them and we'll compare the two. Alright, today is time to work on cooking down our sap that we've collected out of the black walnut trees into syrup. So we've got it set up here. We've got a fire we can build under it. We've got a griddle sitting over the top here, and right now it's just heating up, so I've got a top over it to kind of keep anything from falling out of the trees or any bugs landing in it. There's a few bugs buzzing around, but so what we're going to do is we're going to cook this down this afternoon, and we're going to see where we still got about 3/4 of a gallon over there, but it won't fit in this. So when we cook it down, then we'll put that in. But you know, this is an experiment this year, so we're going to see what happens. But we're going to cook it down this afternoon, and hopefully by the time this stuff cooks down, after it's finished, we should have some black walnut syrup to try out. Alright, as you can see here, we're still cooking this down. We've been cooking it, I've been cooking it about 3 hours, and I've actually added another gallon that we had of sap into here. So now it's starting to cook down, and we've got it going at just a real slow rolling boil, just like I've read that you're supposed to do. So you can see the water vapor coming off of it, so it's cooking the water out of it. So we'll continue doing this, and then we'll see what we get. Like I said, well, this is just an experiment we're doing this year, so you know, who knows what we're going to come out with, but it's looking good so far. Okay, it's starting to get dark, and really nothing else going on other than we're going to continue to boil this down until it gets down to the size where I can take it inside. So once I get that done, then I'll continue the video on the inside. Okay, I've got the fire started here for our second and last batch of our experimental test on making black walnut syrup this year. A couple of things that I forgot to tell you in our last part of the video, so I'm going to go over those in this part of it. One of the things you want to do is be sure and filter your sap, because it'll get bugs, ants will crawl in there. So I use a non-disposable coffee filter that you can just wash out. But just pour it through there so you can catch any ants or anything before you start boiling it. And while I'm pouring this through, another thing that we found is that if you leave this stuff too long, we're at the very end of the season. The last couple of days it hasn't gotten down even close to freezing. It's been in the 40s. And we lost some sap yesterday because it just turned sour. I mean, it was cloudy and it had a bad smell to it. So, and I don't know if you can see this, but we filtered out a bunch of ants there. So I've got about 2 gallons worth here, so we're going to boil this down today, and this will be the last of the season. We're pulling out the taps today too. So, all right, we got a few more ants. So we've got this all filtered out. This is a little bit cloudier than the last batch, so I hope this turns out, but either way, we're going to boil it down today and see what we get. Okay, so after boiling our syrup yesterday, we boiled down 3 gallons and got this much syrup. I'm going to try it out. I've got a piece of homemade bread here that I put some butter on. Smells delicious already. Sweet, it's got a light nutty taste to it. That is awesome. If you got some black walnut trees, you may want to try this on your own property. you know, try to avoid some of the mistakes we made, but this stuff is great. To conclude, I want to take a moment and cover a few things we learned while collecting sap and making the syrup from black walnut trees. We learned about doing this from seeing a video on YouTube, so we decided to try it this year and do a small experiment before investing a lot in equipment. We ordered 5 taps and we improvised the rest. That's how we ended up with plastic water bottles strapped to trees like you see here. The experiment worked and we learned a lot about it, so we'll be ready next winter. The first thing we learned was in tapping the trees, you want to be sure and drill the hole for the taps at a slight upward angle. The first taps we did were level, and they didn't produce as much sap as those done at an angle. And we also learned to look for a large root with a large branch overhead. It seems it is best to tap the southern side of the tree since the tree gets more sun on the southern facing side during winter. The one tree we chose that's on the edge of a clearing produced way more sap than the other trees, and we tapped it on the south side. On a single warm day, this tree produced over a gallon of sap alone. It produced much more sap than the other trees deeper in the woods. We will also have buckets to collect the sap next year. This will make it easier to collect the sap and empty them with less spillage and less chance of ants finding our sweet sap. Speaking of ants, we did get a few in the sap, and so it's a good idea to strain the sap as you pour it into the container you're going to store the sap in. This will filter out any ants or wood particles that make it into the collection containers. One more thing we learned about collecting the sap is that we started very late. We started at the very end of the season, so we only got a few weeks of sap collection. But we're late for this year in trying the experiment, so that's just another reason we didn't invest a large amount in supplies this year. We learned a few things in boiling down the syrup too. It takes a long time to boil down the syrup. When collected, the sap looks very much like water. In fact, a large portion of the sap is just that, water. To make syrup, you simply boil away most of the water to concentrate the sugars and other constituents in the sap. And as you boil away the water, the syrup becomes really sweet and it has a light nutty taste. It turns a beautiful golden color and then darkens as it concentrates down. Now we boiled it down mostly outdoors over an open fire in the fire pit. I've read this was recommended because boiling it inside can make the walls and ceilings sticky, making a huge mess. Once it was boiled down sufficiently, I took it inside to finish it off. But since I was worried about scorching the syrup and it was our first time and I didn't want to ruin it, I tried using a crock pot as a double boiler. After an entire morning, I found that this jizzle was not going to get the job done. Then I placed it on a stove in a double boiler and I got similar results. I found that if you place the syrup in a pan and slowly heat it, you can avoid scorching it while still boiling it down to the consistency you want. I was being too cautious in trying not to scorch it, and I see that now. From about 2 gallons of sap, we got about 8 ounces of syrup. The syrup tastes amazing. It has a light nutty taste that is quite sweet at the same time. If you have some black walnuts on your property, you might want to try this. Now it's the end of the season for this year, but during the spring we plan to mark any black walnut and maple trees we find so we can tap them for next year. With what we learned this year, we should have plenty of syrup going forward. We hope you enjoyed this video. If so, please leave a like, comment, and share it with your friends that might like it. And as always, thanks for watching.